Alright guys, my name is Nathan Alvar, shoot for Team Works, and today we're going to be talking about making a wind call. Not so much reading the wind. Reading the wind is just looking around and being, yeah, it feels and looks like 6 miles an hour coming from my 3 o'clock. A wind call is taking all the information, making a strategy for a first round impact, whether you're target shooting, competition shooting, or you're hunting, and taking a lot of factors in to give you the best odds and information to have a successful first round impact. I know in hunting and competition shooting, that first round you're going to get is the most important round to tell you everything you need to know. And if you're hunting, you normally don't get a second shot if you miss. All right. So first things first, the first question you should probably ask yourself is the wind at your position clean? Meaning, is there any factors with what you're seeing and feeling here at your position as a shooter that's going to dictate whether or not you can trust the wind at your location? So if you're in a hole or you're kind of back behind something or it's swirling, it's probably a dirty area. If you're out in the open, then it's probably a clean area, and the information that you're gathering at your location is going to be a lot more viable for your overall solution downrange. So as you can probably see, I got some trees behind me to myself. So if I have a south wind, it's probably going to be a dirty wind, and I'm not really going to use what I'm feeling here at my location as strongly for making a first round impact. So that's the first thing I got to determine. Today I have an east wind. I'm going to be shooting north. And so everything I feel and see here, for the most part, I think is pretty clean. So the information here is going to be pretty reliable. And then we'll talk about downrange. All right, so after we ask ourselves that question, I think the next important thing is going to be wind direction. Probably more important than wind speed. And I'll show you a few examples why. So first thing I need to do is I need to establish the wind direction in correlation to the angle in which I'm shooting. So I'm shooting straight north. We're going to be shooting a 900-yard target. And so there's a few tricks I can do. Obviously, I can look at the trees. If the wind's blowing enough, I can see which way they're leaning. If there's any grass, there ain't no grass that's blowing around here, but those are some things I can use. One thing I can do here is I can use my Kestrel lanyard. I can kind of give me an indication here. The other thing I can do that I like to do for my location is I got my impeller for my Kestrel. I know the wind's coming from the east, so I'm going to rotate my Kestrel until my impeller quits moving. And right now it's actually switching out of the north. It was just straight east. So it's kind of slowing down and back in right about here. All right. Now I kind of have an idea where my wind's coming from. What I like to do is grab my watch, point my watch here, use that impeller vane, and I imagine that coming across. It's about a 2 o'clock wind. All right, so now at my location, I've kind of established that it's about a 2 to 3 o'clock wind. It was 3 o'clock earlier when I first came out here. I haven't really done any measurements, but just setting up the rifle for this, it was about 3 o'clock. So I'm between a 2 and 3 o'clock wind at my position. I'm going to want to verify that downrange. One thing I can do to verify downrange, I can grab some optics. I find that optics with higher magnification are going to do this better for you. So sometimes I struggle with my Fury 5000s from Vortex, but I'm going to start panning into the wind and see where I can see the mirage go one way and the mirage go the other way, and I should see a boil. That's going to tell me the wind direction. So I'm going to pan over left. It's going left, 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 and right about here I see a boil and I see it going right. So my Kestrel vane was here, the mirage is here, it's about the same. All right, so I've established about a 2 to 2:30, I'd say about a 2 o'clock wind. All right, you can use vegetation, lanyard, if there's long grass downrange, you can use that too, a lake, water, whatever. All right, now one thing I want to show you is how much wind direction plays with my hold. So I have a 900 yard target brought up here on my 6BR. I'm fire foreman for a dasher today. And right now we have a straight 3 o'clock wind, or actually we'll go to 2 o'clock. All right, so for 5 miles an hour I have a 0.45, and for 10 miles an hour I have a 1.2. Hopefully you can see that. When I go to 1 o'clock wind, I'm at a 0.13 and a 0.56. I'm half the wind that I just was from a 2 o'clock to a 1 o'clock wind. All right. Now, I'm not going to I know the difference, and most people know the difference between a 5 mile an hour wind and a 10 mile an hour wind. But a lot of people aren't paying attention, let's say, from a 1 o'clock to a 2 o'clock wind, and that's just because of the cosine of the wind. I think a lot of people, they think they miss because they had the wind value wrong. More than likely, they were within the error of the target. We'll get to that. But they didn't get the direction correct. All right? So sometimes it's not about truing your wind value to a speed, but maybe more to a direction. All right, let's move on. So next thing is wind speed. We can use our Kestrel for that. So the Kestrel function has this minimum, average, maximum chart. That's a good basis. So I'm going to hold this up for a little bit. Hopefully I can get a gust here. It was gusting earlier. For this video it probably won't. Good for me, bad for the lesson. All right, so we're a 1 to a 3 mile an hour. It was up to 8 I think earlier, but this is just for all examples and just for getting a process down. All right, so now I have an average of 2, a max of 3, and a minimum of 1. That could be anything, depends on where you shoot. Now, it doesn't mean now that I'm going to hold a 2 o'clock or 2 mile an hour wind at a 2 o'clock value, right? Another thing that I want to look out for is what is the strongest sustaining wind. So sometimes, depending on the location or the day that you're shooting, let's say your average was 10, your max was 18, and your low was 8. Well, I think a lot of new shooters will put in a wind direction, select that average, and that's what they're going to start sending down range and see how it plays out for them. But one thing you want to do is just go to this page on your Kestrel. I think is a better thing to do, and just watch it and see what number you're seeing for the longest amount of time. So, let's say I was seeing 5 miles an hour for 20 seconds, but then it dropped down to 1 and hovered around 2. But for the longest time, 5 miles an hour is what I was saying. Is the longest sustaining wind. Well, that's probably closer to what I'm going to want to hold down range when I'm shooting. All right. The average doesn't mean that that's the wind value which we're holding. We kind of want to bet against, or bet for, depending how you look at it, the longest sustaining wind in the situation in which we are in. All right. So now we've established direction. We kind of established speed. Some questions you can ask yourself: can I feel it on my face? Probably 3 miles an hour. Am I constantly feeling it on my face? A 5 mile an hour wind. Is vegetation starting to show me the direction of which the wind is blowing? It's probably closer to 7. Our limbs on trees starting to dance is probably a 9. Our big limbs moving, it's probably a 12, and so on and so on. So those are just some tricks. There's plenty of YouTube videos on judging wind speed. Precision Rifle Network has a good one. All right, next step is looking down range, and see, there's the wind. 1 second. 5, 9, 12, 11, 10, about 9, staying around 9. So when I feel the wind blowing right now, it's about a 9 mile an hour wind. It gusted up for 12 and then stayed steady at 9. So if I'm feeling this, I'm probably going to hold for a 9 mile an hour wind, because right now it's actually the most consistent part of this. Yeah, I got up to 12, but most part it's 9. And that's something that we can pay attention to. And then it lulls all the way down to 2 to 3 miles an hour. So I know that when it's lulling, I'm probably about a 2 mile an hour wind. And when I'm feeling it like I am right now and it's blowing a little bit, I'm probably closer to a 9. All right, so now I want to look down range. I want to think about the bullet's flight path. Is there anything in the terrain, like a catastrophic wind or something, that's going to increase my wind value downrange or decrease my wind value? Is there an area in which the wind's going to be blocked? And then I want to start averaging that into my head with my firing solution. So I got, 200 yards of the wind being blocked. Well, if my first initial call was 10 mile an hour from 2 o'clock, but now I have 200 yards to a 900-yard target where it's being blocked, well, maybe I should start holding what maybe a 700-yard shot is, because I'm 200 yards of it being almost no wind. Those are things that we have to keep in mind. All right, after we do that, we've kind of made our guesstimate for the wind down range. I can go in more detail on all these little sub areas. This is kind of a process we're going through today. So if you want to see that, let me know. The next thing we want to do is figure out the wind number of the target. So right now, I have a 900-yard 3/4 ripstick. It's 0.4 mils wide. So next thing I do is I go 900 yards on my Kestrel. I turn off spin drift, or you can leave it on. I haven't really decided which one's best. Maybe someone can chirp in. I'm going to put my wind direction in there, 2 o'clock, and then I'm going to keep changing my wind value in my Kestrel until from 0. So I'll set it to 0, and then keep increasing the mile per hour until it matches the width of the target. So a 4 mile an hour is a 0.3. A 5 mile an hour is a 0.5. All right, or 0.45. So it's about a 4.5 mile an hour target. So I know that from one edge to the other edge, that target covers 4.5 mile per hour. All right. So I can kind of game that or strategize that. If I'm holding center on the target, I'm 2.25 on one side mile per hour and 2.25 on the other side, as long as I'm not canting the rifle. So now I know the wind forgiveness of the target. That means each time I bracket the width of the target, I am moving the target another 4.5 mile per hour. So if I hold right edge and I shoot, I'm anywhere from theoretically about 0 wind right to left to 4.5, and then if I bracket the whole target width again over, then now I'm 4.5 to 9 mile an hour, right? So today I'm down to a 1 to 3 mile an hour when it's at a low, and I'm up to about a 9 average when I feel it blowing up to a 12. So theoretically, almost in 2 shots, I should be able to hit that target if the wind stays the same, if I'm quick on my follow shot. So even if I don't see a hit or a miss downrange, or don't see a miss really, but I know the wind's blowing, I can make that second shot correction and get it. Next thing I want to do is find kind of the wind speed of my gun for that first target. So what I like to do is I'll keep the wind direction 2 o'clock, and I will put in a 1 mile an hour wind, and that helps me true the wind speed downrange. So why that's important is a 1 mile an hour wind at 900 yards is a 0.14, so a mil and a half, or 0.1 mil and a half. So if I shoot that target holding straight up, and I missed 2/10 off the right side, and I had 2/10 of targets width, that means I missed by 4/10. Well, that means that for every mile per hour, I'm going to move the impact of the bullet 0.15 mils. Well, I tell myself right there in quick math that I was about 3 mile an hour off on my wind speed. All right, so if I'm holding straight up and I miss, it's a 3 mile an hour wind. Then I go to what my 3 mile an hour wind call is if I haven't memorized, or if I have an arm board with wind columns or whatever. And now I should be able to shoot and hit that target. And if I hit the left edge of the target, on the very left edge, and I held center, then I know that I was about a mile per hour off, because it's 0.15. And right then and there, that tells me a lot of information that I need to know downrange. And there's a lot of strategy we can play into making a wind call. These are just some of the basic things. I think new shooters get really caught up on just pointing the Kestrel into the wind where they think the wind's coming, taking the average, and they go from there. So